Hi everyone, my name is Jose, and my research proposal paper was based on how physical activity can be beneficial in helping children and adolescents, both presently and in their futures, with their anxiety. Based on the research, I found that 10 to 20% of children and adolescents are currently living with a mental health problem. And what I found most interesting or fascinating about my research proposal is that there is an estimate that more than half of the young adults who suffer from a mental health disorder first experienced it as a child. Physical activity is defined as the distribution of energy throughout the body, and so it is advised for children and adolescents to have an estimated of at least 60 minutes of moderate to dynamic physical exercise on a daily basis, and also include muscle and bone strengthening exercises at least 3 times a week. In my research, I found that a worldwide survey was done in 2016 where 1.6 million adolescents, that is 81% of the sample, was physically inactive. There was a methodological review of long-term studies that have assessed the change in physical activity between the ages of 10 and 19, and that discovered that on average there was a decrease of 7% in physical activity every year. With that being said, key issues lied on a decrease of physical activity such as magnetism, of computer games, social media, and concerns from parents and having their children play outside. The goal of my research was to deliberate how physical activity impacts the psychosocial and emotional mental health and well-being of children and adolescents. There has been recommended data that partaking in physical activity can support young children and adolescents with their current mental health. The aim of the systematic review and meta-analysis was to determine the effort of physical activity sessions and mental health outcomes, and also to systematically synthesize observational evidence concerning the connection between both physical, sedentary behavior, and also mental health in preschoolers, children, and adolescents. The population and sampling that my study would consist of would be conducted by examining the link between physical activity and mental health in children and adolescents by a non-probability sampling, being that participants should be met by a criterion to be surveyed. That being said, a group of 750 children and adolescents will report their level of physical activity through a self-reporting questionnaire. The sample will be selected by the means clustering through the sampling of several ages in addition to the random selection of school classes in schools with more than one group for 5th and 6th grades. The cluster sampling will then be performed once the selection of 12 schools are selected. Instrumentation. When it comes to the instrumentation, physical activity will be measured individually through a self-reported measurement as the instrument in order to measure the level of performing physical activities in children and adolescents. The questionnaire will contain 5 questions that will denote distinctive areas that are associated with physical activity. The questions would consist of the following. 1. Do you participate in an organized sport after school? 2. Do you participate in a sport that is not organized after school? 3. How many times a week do you participate in the gym for at least 20 minutes? And then the 4th question, how many hours during the week do you normally participate in physical activity to the point that you know where you feel out of breath or shortness of breath? And then the 5th question is, are you a part of a competitive sport? So there are 4 potential responses that vary from 1 to 4, indicating the level 1 represents the lowest of performing physical activity, and then level 4 indicating the maximum level of physical activity in questions 1, 2, and 5. For questions 3 and 4, there are up to 5 possible answers that vary from 1 to 4 through 4. These two options involve a less effect on participating in physical activity that are given a value of 1, the third a value of 2, and the fourth and fifth are given a value of 3 and 4. The entire score tallies to the sum of the 5 questions and a physical activity index that was utilized in other studies. In addition to this instrument, there would be the Instrument of Pediatric Anxiety Rating Scale, also known as PARS, that would be an essential instrument that is utilized in order to assess children and adolescents. The PARS is a clinician-rated instrument that is utilized to assess the severity of symptoms that are associated with DSM-5 anxiety disorders over time in children and adolescents between the ages of 6 and 17. The PARS is comprised of a symptom checklist of 50 items alongside another section based on specific and also impairment items that are rated on a 6-point Likert scale. And in order for the checklist to be completed, the therapist must gather information from interviews with the child or adolescent and the parent. The therapist will then score each symptom either as present or absent throughout the past week. And then all 50 items of the checklist are validated by the therapist and then combined and measured on a 7-point scale of global severity through several dimensions of anxiety, such as the number of symptoms, the frequency, the severity of distress, physical symptoms, etc. The psychometric properties that are entailed consist of an interreliability of 0.85 or 0.85. The instrument of the study will consist of a between group design where children and adolescents will be evaluated prior to engaging in physical activity, throughout the physical activity, and after engaging in physical activity. The scores from the questionnaire along with the PARS will be measured to determine how effective and beneficial has physical activity been in children and adolescents with anxiety. Follow-up sessions will then be set with the therapist providing PARS and questionnaires in order to collect the data and then ensure if, in fact, the benefits of physical exercises are effective on a quarterly basis. The individuals will first participate in PARS prior to engaging in physical activity, and then they will be asked a series of questions once they have engaged in physical activity. The internal validity will be dependent based on the individual's response or responses regarding how they felt before engaging in physical exercises and how they felt after engaging in physical exercises. The external validity would then consist of a population validity where a group of children and adolescents, both boys and girls, are being measured on how physical exercise can be beneficial in helping with anxiety. When it comes to the analysis, the interval data will be generated from the study where the participants will be provided with information during the research and after on a quarterly basis from the questionnaire alongside with PARS. The data will then be provided with concise information that will enable other researchers to determine whether physical activity in children and adolescents helps to minimize levels of anxiety. The rationale for using the statistical test for analysis would be a 2-sample t-test. This would be essential in having the data for children, adolescents, boys and girls, while also comparing how the participant felt prior to physical activity and after engaging in physical activity, while determining on a quarterly basis if in fact the participants still experience a lesser level of anxiety. Thank you so much.